All right, welcome. This is usually the time I go start off with Andy. Did you know? Or Andy, let me tell you about my weekend. But alas, it is not to be today. Andy is somewhere down south helping out his young one, um, driving on 95. Hopefully, he's going to stop and see Bucky's. He told me he would. Hopefully, it's more than just to use the bathroom and he can enjoy one of those fruity pebble marshmallow bites or one of their brisket sandwiches. We need Andy to hit Bucky's and give us a update on there. So, Andy, as you listen to this podcast on your way back from Florida, please stop and see Bucky's. But usually, I have my partner in crime with me. Today, I do not, and I tell you, you're in for an experience today. So let's start off. You probably aren't seeing me on video because I'm not recording video today. It's probably a good thing. I got my hair cut this weekend. Won't say the place where I went, but I got my hair cut this weekend, and I don't know if it particularly came out all right. The problem is growing up, I used to like going to barbershops, and I enjoyed barbershops immensely. And you go in, you have the old swivel chairs. You have a lot of the same guys cutting hair over and over. It was just a really good environment. They had at the end of the haircut, you get the shave at the end, especially around your neck. It felt always was awesome. And those, I don't know if it's for other people have different experiences, but I think those barbershops are largely gone now. And so you have all the strip mall barbershops and you know who they are, and you have like the sports clips and the cartoon clips and the kids clips and all this other stuff. So you can be doing something other than getting your hair cut. You can be watching TV and hopefully it'll go faster, right? And there's a lot of really creative ideas out there, but I miss those old days. And so like to flash forward to where we are today, I use the same haircut place and it's fine. I appreciate that I go in there and they have I give them my phone number and they have exactly what I've liked in the past, so they reconfirm that. And the reason why that's important is because every time you go in there, it's literally somebody different. I have rarely gone into this place, and I've been in North Carolina now for 2.5 years. I've been going there for 2.5 years. I've rarely gone in there where it's the same people on successive times, and I don't know if that's just because they can't keep or they rotate from place to place, or the hours are too much, and it never seems like there's more than three people cutting hair at any one time there, and it just always seems a little unusual, and I guess challenging. So I got my hair cut by somebody who I hadn't seen there before in 2.5 years, and it looked fine. We'll see what happens at the end of the day here today, but that was my good barbershop experience. But and here's the other thing. I remember when I lived in Florida, there was a barbershop that came that started, and it was kind of one of those. It wanted to be like a little bougie or like trendy or hipster type of barbershop. You'd go in there and you could actually order any type of mixed drink or alcoholic beverage you wanted. You had to be 21 to get in there, of course, which always was a unique marketing tactic. I always felt, and it was fine, but I don't want all that. I just want somebody to cut my hair. And I want to go in there and I spend 20 minutes in there. I want to chat maybe about some of the sports or whatever that's going on. Maybe I don't even want to chat at all, but I definitely don't need somebody preparing me a drink as if I'm going to sit there and hang out all day. I want recognizable faces, and maybe I'm just yearning for the days of old. But okay, that opening was a little bit more about delaying my NFL draft recap. A couple things I want to look if um, this is probably going to be heavy on the sports today, Andy's usually here to rein me in and keep me focused on a couple of the topics outside of sports. We're not a sports podcast. We enjoy sports. I really enjoy a lot of sports, and you'll hear some of that today. But um, just want to talk a little bit about NFL draft, a lot about NFL draft. I want to talk a little college lacrosse, and then I'll hit up a couple other things here as we go along because Andy's not here to rein me in and he's not here to repress me. And so I can do what I want to do on this podcast now. So, anyways, and I got to fill 25, 30 minutes. I mean, I got to go through what I'm my comfort zone. This is where I feel good, and this is where I really want to get into. Okay. Anyways, so we'll let Andy recap the Lions draft next week. But for me, the Cowboys, and again, I had been saying I don't even know who drafted. I don't get what we're doing. Um, that was never more apparent than today. Now, maybe it's because I don't follow college football as much as I used to, but I still know the big names. I still know a lot of the key players. But for the Cowboys, the draft was they got pretty decent grades. B, seen some players B plus. They needed an offensive lineman. They needed some other help on defense, but they really need a running back. Let me just read you off who the Cowboys on their roster as of today, who their running back depth chart is. Snoop Connor from Ole Miss, Malik Davis from Florida, Rico Dowdell from South Carolina. I know Rico because my son went to South Carolina. He was a good running back there. I enjoyed him. Roy, he was on the team last year and he did pretty good. Royce Freeman from Oregon, Hunter Lupe from North Dakota State, and then Deuce Vaughn, he of 5'6", 175 from Kansas State. Deuce was also on the team last year. I like him as a little bit of changes pace back and whatnot, but he's 5 freaking 6. And yes, he could get lost in some of these things. He could also get just brutalized by just about anybody in the league. The punter could probably brutalize Deuce Vaughn. My point is we had two, four, six people on the roster. I was in Florida for much of this time. So Ole Miss, Florida, South Carolina, I knew those teams. I mean, again, Rico Dowdell aside, Snoop Connor, don't know who the heck he is. Malik Davis, don't know who the heck he is. And we're going to go into our NFL season where this is where we're supposed to be. Jerry Jones didn't want to make a change at head coach because he didn't want to upset the apple cart and say, hey, let's go for it. I'm too old at this point to be getting where I need to be, and which is a Super Bowl. Let's not forget just an NFC Championship game. But I'm getting too old, so I'm not going to change my coach and have to get adjusted to a new guy. But yet, I'm also not going to adjust a key position on the field. And yes, you can say wide receiver is a lot more important. In today's NFL, yeah, I get it. But you can also see where running backs have become more and more important to a lot of these teams as you go through. The Kansas City, they didn't have the wide receiver core. They built on strong defense, and they had a running back who could get them yards when they needed to get yards. Look at San Francisco. Yes, I get it. They still need a lot of playmaking running back or wide receivers, but they've got Christian McCaffrey. They got Debo Samuel, Debo who does wide receiver, tight end, and running back all in one series could be. And so the running back is really important to the field. And I get it's been devalued. It's not a first round. It may not be a top 10 pick anymore. In fact, this year there wasn't even a running back selected in the first round. So, but the Cowboys, if we're going to be a viable playoff team, you should have some type of good running back combination. We lost Pollard. Look, we lost Ezekiel Elliott. We paid him way too much. Thanks, Jerry. But we need some of these we need a semi decent running back, and all of these guys, Hunter Lupe is 6'1". Everyone else is below six, either 6 foot or below. So rounded out by Deuce Vaughn, 5'6", 175. So I'm frustrated, of course, but it's also expected, right? I'm also beginning to wonder. Andy and I talk about ageism a little bit with our presidential candidates, Trump and Biden, but I think Jerry Jones is either 1 year older or 1 year younger than Biden is right now, and he said some pretty stupid shit on the press conference tour around this week, and I'm just beginning to wonder if he's just not of the right faculties anymore to be managing or the public facing image of your football team. I get it. That's who Jerry is, right? That's his team. He's made it into a multi-billion-dollar team and one of the richest sports franchises in the world, haven't been to an NFC Championship game in 35 years or whatever it is. It's almost close to it's preposterous. So, or 20, 30 years or whatever it is. All right, so that's that, and I'll let Andy come in and talk about his Lions when we meet up later this week. But let me do another thing. We mentioned it last week. Six quarterbacks in the first 12 picks, and I'm not here to say one pick is better than another, but what I want to talk about is how many quarterbacks, the success rate of these quarterbacks. So in the Super Bowl era, there have been 134 quarterbacks taken in the first round of the NFL draft. And if Andy were here, I'd say, "Hey Andy, how many of those do you think would have made it? Would have been at least a serviceable quarterback or somebody who had some sort of career with um, with an NFL team?" Because what we'll find is through this list here, most of these quarterbacks were good, but they weren't good with the team that drafted them. So, how many do you think would have made it? And the answer would be, depending on your math and what your success criteria, about 45%. So less than half of 134 quarterbacks taken in the first round were would have made it on an like long term NFL team. You have, like, for example, the Bears had five, so they had Mitch Trubisky, Rex Grossman, Cade McNown, Jim Harbaugh, and Jim McMahon. That's a pretty successful grouping of the five, right? Mitch Trubisky, you could say, is a bust. He didn't work out. Rex Grossman, I'd give it to him, right? Cade McNown, he survived a long time in the thing, always as a backup though, not a first round pick. Jim Harbaugh, Jim McMahon, those that's good, right? Three Rex Grossman, Jim Harbaugh, and Jim McMahon, 3 out of 5. That's pretty good. The Bengals, they had six: Joe Burrow, Carson Palmer, Akili Smith, remember him? David Klingler, he was throwing that ball around so much. Jack Thompson and Greg Cook. So I'd give Burrow and Palmer, right? 2 of 4. Not great. The Bills, Josh Allen, EJ Manuel, JP Lossman, and Jim Kelly. So two, right? Broncos, check these out. Paxton Lynch, Tim Tebow, Jay Cutler, and Tommy Maddox. Do you remember Tommy Maddox? I remember him coming out. It's supposed to be great. And Paxton Lynch, Andy and I talked about that last week. Jay Cutler, probably the only one, and somebody might say, well, we give him a half point. He wound up on the Bears and he did decent there. Here's a good one. Browns, check these out. Baker Mayfield, Johnny Manziel, Brandon Weeden. God, that guy was so old even when he got drafted. Brady Quinn, Tim Couch, Bernie Kosar, who was actually a supplemental pick back when they had supplemental picks, and Mike Phipps. So I give Baker Mayfield, right? I mean, he's made it to a second contract. He's made it to a big contract. Bernie Kosar, of course. So that's a pretty good one. And you go through this list, but I mean, the Colts, six: Andrew Luck, Peyton Manning, those two wins, right? Jeff George, John Elway. Elway didn't wind up playing anything for the Colts. Art Schlichter and Burt's Jones. So you get three there. The Cardinals, Kyler Murray, Josh Rosen, Matt Leinart, Tim Rosenbach, the supplemental, Kelly Stauffer, and Steve, I can't even pronounce his last name. It's crazy to go through this list to see how many of these people actually wound up playing. The Raiders had three, so Jamarcus Russell, Todd Marinovich, and Mark Wilson. So none of those wound up making it anywhere. The Rams had, I think they went 2 for 2, Jared Goff and Sam Bradford, though neither, Jared Goff is obviously a much better player on the Lions, even though he took the Rams to a Super Bowl or was on the team when the Rams went to a Super Bowl. Sam Bradford, though, he was a decent quarterback, and I gave them, he made a career. But it's interesting that, like, you really have to have these quarterbacks in the right positions. A lot of these quarterbacks would have been good if they were in the right positions. And so when we talk about, and by I mean that, the right team construct, the right understanding of how to coach, the right coaches and such. And I think it's when you look at these, um, you know, it becomes increasingly challenging to make a good team. So when I look at this year's draft, you have the six quarterbacks that were taken, of course. Um, and who's in the best position right now? Well, the number one draft pick, Caleb Williams, he's going to Chicago, and normally you'd be like, well, Chicago, they got to be bad because they were the number one draft pick. Nope, because Carolina was stupid and threw away that pick last year. So you have Caleb Williams who's going into a team that was, I think they were 7-10. They were very competitive in the last half of the year. They had their own number one draft pick at nine, which they went with a wide receiver. They had DJ Moore. They've got a pretty good defense. They've got a pretty good running game. And now you have a quarterback who's going to go in and he's got a high chance of success here. Whereas if you look at Jaden Daniels, who's a great quarterback, but he's going into with a head coach who is a defensive minded coach, and Cliff Kingsbury is their offensive coordinator, who couldn't do great at Arizona. But again, maybe it's just the environment, and maybe he's a better offensive coordinator than he is a head coach. Then you go to Drake May, who was falling on a lot of people's boards, but the Patriots liked him. They have no weapons around him. He probably is not going to start this year. So, where is that situation going to go? Do you trust that organization to develop somebody, or was it really Tom Brady all along? It's a little tongue-in-cheek joke because obviously Bill Belichick is one of the greatest coaches of all time. Then you have in Atlanta, you have Michael Penix Jr. He's going to a situation where he's going to sit for 2 years. He's going to be 27 by the time he starts. And is that a great situation to go into? One, it's a good situation because he's got a really good, um, if they keep those offensive weapons that they got, they have a good chance of success. But I mean, you're going to be 2 years in the league, and who knows at that point? Yes, it worked out for some quarterbacks. You obviously in Green Bay, you had Aaron Rodgers who sat for 3 years behind Brett Favre, and then you have Jordan Love who sat for 2 or 3 years behind Aaron Rodgers, and right now it looks like he's gonna work out. But then so and then you have JJ McCarthy with Minnesota. I like that pick, and then Bo Nix with Denver, to be seen whether that's going to work out or not. But they're going to have chances, and so but history tells us, probably at least three of those are not going to work out past their first contract. I mean, let's go back even to the 2021 draft. You had five quarterbacks taken: Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Justin Fields, and Mac Jones. Trevor Lawrence is probably the best one out of them, right? I mean, you have Justin Fields that could work out potentially, but with the Steelers, Zach Wilson's not going to happen. Trey Lance, I forgot he's even on the Cowboys from time to time, and Mac Jones, he's backing up Trevor Lawrence. So I mean, where are we at with that? 2022. Um, 0 for 1. I mean, that was Kenny Pickett, right? And then last year, Bryce Young, Stroud, and Anthony Richardson. So, I'm not ready to sell on Bryce Young just yet. Let's see what happens this year. They're trying to build a good team around him. But then you have Stroud, who clearly looks like a winner, and Anthony Richardson looks promising. So, but the history of time will tell. The history in the Super Bowl era tells us that half of these quarterbacks that were drafted this weekend or on Friday night specifically are just not going to work out. So that's something we have to look at and go through. It is fascinating to look at all of these lists here and see, remember who was a number one draft pick. Christian Ponder, remember him, 2011? It's crazy. Um, Washington. Listen there. Dwayne Haskins, Robert Griffin III, who lasted one good year. Jason Campbell, who I did like. Patrick Ramsey and Heath Schuler. Um, what I always love is the teams that draft. Heath Schuler's a fun one because I always love that they drafted another quarterback later in the draft there, even though Heath Schuler was like a Heisman Trophy finalist. Did he win one year? I can't even remember. but everybody was excited about Heath Schuler, and he wound up being a bust, and the backup wound up being playing more years. Was it? I kind of can't remember who it was, Gus Farrat, or whatnot. So okay, wrap up. See, I'm at 20 minutes already, and I'm just getting into some of the other stuff. So I had a good weekend this weekend. Went up to see my son play. He plays club lacrosse at Virginia Tech. Club, if you're not familiar, the club sports scene is a lot more, is a lot bigger than I had ever previously done, especially on lacrosse and and hockey. These are two really big things. Because a lot of schools, if you're not familiar with college lacrosse, there's only 70 some odd Division I men's lacrosse teams. There's a lot more girls lacrosse teams, or women's lacrosse teams. But on the men's side, it's only 70 some odd. And there's, I don't know, so many conferences, but the ACC, the Big Ten, and the Ivy Leagues pretty much dominate men's lacrosse. And for all the right reasons, the big schools. Well, in the club lacrosse, those big schools that don't have a men's Division I varsity team do have club teams, and they're pretty strong. And Virginia Tech's one of those. They've been number one for much of the year, but definitely in the top five. So I went up there to see their conference tournament. They were playing Liberty, which is one of their rivals, and unfortunately it didn't work out too well. But they still made the national tournament. So it's the 16 team tournament starting next week. Virginia Tech's the fifth seed. If they win, they'll play for the four seed Liberty, which will be pretty fun. But if you look at those teams, like the number one seed is BYU, the number one two team is Texas, number three is Chapman, a school out of California that's been very successful in the club lacrosse scene. And then you have Liberty and Virginia Tech, but you see like Michigan State's in there, and some of the other big schools up there as well. So it's an exciting time of year. It's my son's last year playing in college. He'll graduate this year, and it's come a long way. We talked about youth sports, and my son was right at the start of a lot of this transition from where it was before. They still had at the time a rec league, and then you had a travel program on top of that, and then you had the club scene that came in from there, like the youth club scene that because the travel teams used to be an extension of your rec program, and then the club said, well, we don't need to be connected to any sort of organization. We'll just make our own group of the best kids in the area, and we'll travel around. And so my son was at the start of a lot of that when we were in Maryland. We went and played lacrosse in Germany for a year when we were stationed over there. And then we went down to Florida, and Florida is still not, they like to think it's a hotbed sometimes, but the reality is it's still, trying to gain notoriety. There's a lot of really great Florida kids who've come out, a couple of them playing for Notre Dame right now, and really key players on Notre Dame, but they're playing around. But I mean, Florida's got some good developing kids. And so at the time, though, they were blowing up with the youth club scene, and my son caught on there, got recruited to play at Jacksonville, and then transferred to Virginia Tech. So it's been a long career for him in the and so I'm proud of all that he's done, and he was a great player, and I love watching him play. So I got to see that one last time. My wife's going to go out to the national tournament. Unfortunately, I got wretched work to stay in, but it'll be a fun time out in Austin. If you're in that area, go watch the MCLA tournament. On the flip side, the NCAA tournament is out, or it's coming out. They've got conference tournaments this weekend. This is another exciting time, but unfortunately, unlike the basketball tournament where there is a chance of upsets, there is that 5-12 upset that's possibly going to happen. Unfortunately, I was talking about those three big conferences, ACC, Big Ten, and the Ivy Leagues. They pretty much dominate, and there's a one chance that you might get an upset in round one. Um, the likelihood of uh, an elite, like a semifinal or final run for somebody on the outside is really just not possible. And that's where I think Division I lacrosse is struggling. I don't. You can call it struggling or not. I mean, there's the big three conferences, and then there's the schools that can add it. They're usually a smaller school. They don't have huge like a football print, and a lot of kids like to go places, the big schools, to get that full college experience. Not to say that the smaller schools aren't don't offer that as well, but it's just a little bit different in some of those bigger schools. Anyways, moving on. I got a couple of minutes left. I want to hit a couple more things here. Probably just really quick. I looked at the movie list this week, and the movies that were out in the theaters this week. So these were the top five. And if I were here, I'd ask Andy, tell me if you've heard of these. Challengers, Unsung Hero, Godzilla versus Kong, or times Kong, the new Empire, Civil War, which we know Andy saw, Abigail. I mean, those are the top five movies this week. And then you go beyond it, the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, which I would have loved this scene. That looks really good. I might have to go check that out when it comes out on streamer. Kung Fu Panda 4, which we rented and streamed it at home. Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, Dune Part 2, Boy Kills World. Um, and I will tell you, like, Challengers won the weekend with $15 million, but everything else was like $7 million. I'm struggling right now to see where there's anything to be excited about the movie theaters this summer. I mean, you got Futurosa, I think that's what it's called. The new Mad Max one that's getting a lot of publicity now. That's got one of the Hemsworth boys in it, and it looks pretty interesting. I did like Mad Max Fury Road when that came out. That was with Tom Hardy. I really enjoyed that one. I didn't see the original Mad Maxes, but maybe that's something to look forward to. But man, this is going to be really hard summer this year for movies out there. So we'll see where that goes. We'll see what happens on the movie theaters. I'm excited about the TV season. We've talked a lot about that. We've got House of Dragon coming back. We've got The Acolyte coming in. We've got a lot of good television that's lining up for June, July timeframe. So I'm excited about that. And so Andy and I will be catching up there as you go. And here you have it. 27 minutes in. I didn't talk about the White House Correspondents' Dinner. I probably could have put it in there. Colin Jost did a good job from all intents and purposes. But one thing I may want to do moving forward is, have you guys looked at the lineup of the cable news channels? And I was going to get into this a little bit more if I had some time, but I'm running low here. But look at the lineups of the cable news channels, and figure out, like, and I'll bring this to the table for Andy, and just look at what type of programming they're putting out there this weekend. Because I was in a hotel room, for this college lacrosse weekend. I was in a hotel room. MSNBC and CNN were both covering the White House Correspondents' Dinner as if it was the Oscars, and they were having these discussions about it. They were having the red carpet on it, and I'm like, what are we doing here? What the fuck are we doing? And then Fox News didn't have it on at all, and I'm just sitting there. I'm really worried. Like, like, that's the type of programming that we're at when you're trying to fill 24 hours. We're going to get to CNN where they're going to start showing us movies. It's a similar way of MTV used to be about music, and now all MTV does is show us movies and other stupid shows, and God forbid we ever have a music video out ever again. But that's where we're at right now. And I think this is when we talk about malinformation, and what we're coming up with the political season, and all of the things that are crazy out there, and all the beliefs that people have based on limiting their view on one single thing. It's a little crazy to me. So something to get into is we can look forward to more of Men of a Certain X podcast as we go through, as we build up to this election season. It's gonna be a good one, but we've still got a lot of things to talk to, and I hope Andy, you can give me some feedback when we connect on Wednesday. And I sure hope I'm recording all this, because I'm at 30 minutes here, and it would be a waste if I had to repeat myself all over again. All right, everyone. Until next time, we'll see you.